Donnie slept in until 9:45, but this was it. It was packing day. He got out of the bed and gathered his stuff together. He checked his phone, and the weather said it'd get pretty windy around 2 this afternoon. Best that they got the tents down before then. Donnie went outside to find breakfast. I mean, his breakfast have consisted of many things, but 3 times it had something to do with bread and cheese. Surely he would have something different, right? There wasn't many choices, was there? But he didn't care. He'd be home soon enough where he could eat whatever his heart desired. He all knows what that is. The others were starting to crawl out of their tents. There wasn't anything planned for the day. If anything, they planned to get home before supper. About an hour later, unpacking was in full swing. Chairs were being folded up, and sleeping bags were being rolled. Mikey spent his time making lunch so that everyone could have the energy. Donnie walked over to the restrooms one last time. He walked over to the sink and washed up. Boy, whoever was in there last left a huge mess around the sink. How could someone even spill that much water? Donnie was practically stepping in an inch-deep puddle in front of the sink. He pocketed the soap and looked underneath the sink to see one of the pipes was leaking. That would do it, Donnie confirmed to himself. He would fix it up if he had his tools. He stood back up to see a giant garden spider right on the lip of the sink, slowly crawling closer to his hand. In a panic, he ripped his hand away from the force, throwing his body weight from one direction to the other way too quickly. His foot slipped from underneath him, and he landed smack dab on the tiled floor, right onto his bruised hip. Donnie quickly got up and slid himself away from the sink. Leaning himself on the wall, he checked his hip. Whatever had healed from last time he bruised it just got resetted, but this time it felt way worse. Maybe because tile doesn't give like dirt does. Tears were escaping his eyes once more. "Every single day!" Donnie yelled. The walls yelled back at him. Sobs escaped his throat as tears flowed down his face. "Why can't I go through one day without getting hurt?" Donnie's voice cracked. Tears dripped from his chin, adding to the large puddle on the restroom floor. Just then, the door opened. "Hey, Donnie! I just came to tell you—" Mikey cut himself off when he saw the distress on Donnie's face, the way he was slouched against the wall, and how he wrapped his hands around his hip. Mikey quickly came over and crouched down. "Hey, what's wrong, Dee? Does your hip hurt again?" Donnie being babied by his baby brother? This was priceless. Donnie needed to keep himself together, 'cause if he continued to cry, Mikey would be crying too. He tried. He really tried, but he didn't have the energy to tough it out. More tears started dripping from his eyes. He could feel his little brother getting worried. Mikey's fingers tightened, gripping harder to Donnie's coat. "I'll be fine," Donnie said through a sigh. "Just please help me get up, okay?" Donnie asked as politely as he could. Mikey grabbed onto his arm and helped pull him up. He put some weight onto his leg, and yep, it hurt like the dickens, whoever they are. Donnie and Mikey slowly made it back to the camp, limping along the way. They turned the corner to find the others finishing their lunch. "Don't tell the others about my hip," Donnie whispered to Mikey. Mikey creased an eyebrow, but Donnie's eyes had a sense of pleading. "Please?" Mikey gently nodded. Donnie got onto his 2 feet and tried not to limp as much as he could. They made it to the picnic table and sat down to eat. It looked like it was turkey sandwiches one last time. There was so much running around in Donnie's head. He could barely eat. Every bite felt like it was going to choke him. Mikey must have seen him struggle. He reached out and gently grabbed Donnie's hand. Donnie gripped back harder every time he swallowed. Mikey had finished his sandwich already. He grabbed a cup and filled it with drinking water, then handed it to Donnie. If Donnie couldn't swallow, then he'd washed it down instead. Lunch felt like it took twice as long to finish, but he got it done, with some emotional support on the side. Leo and Raph were getting more of the stuff packed away. Donnie lifted himself from the table. "Let me do the dishes," he said. "Are you sure?" Mikey asked, tilting his head slightly. Donnie nodded and got the stuff ready. He started scrubbing, feeling his hips scream in protest. He tried his best to ignore it. He had to ignore it. He wanted to be useful. To help with packing any way he could. The wind started to pick up. Was it 2 o'clock already? Donnie picked up his phone to check on the time. It was only 12:40. The winds came early. Donnie looked up to see the others having a heyday with folding up the tents. As Leo and Raph were trying to fold the tent up, Mikey was just having fun wearing the tent fly as a cape. The pain in Donnie's hip was getting worse. He could barely stand anymore. Raph was walking by with his tent all folded up and packed tightly into his zipper bag. He must have gotten the tingles again, 'cause he stopped and looked over at Donnie. "Hey, you doing okay?" Raph asked, placing his tent bag down on the picnic table. "Yep, just peachy. Totally not experiencing pain right now," Donnie said through gritted teeth. Raph looked down to see the bruise on Donnie's hip had spread down his leg and looked more darker than yesterday. He grabbed Donnie under the arms and lifted him. "Hey, no, I'm not done with the dishes anyway. Just let me finish them," Donnie argued, though it wasn't very convincing. Mikey quickly took over doing the dishes. Leo grabbed the tent bag and brought it to the taxi rocket's truck. Raph carried Donnie over to the car and sat him down in the back seat. "When did your bruise get that bad?" Raph asked, his brows creasing. Donnie looked at Raph. Dang, he just wanted to cry again. He hated when Raph acted like their dad. But telling Raph what happened was probably a better idea than keeping it bottled up. "Earlier this morning, slipped in the bathroom." "Why didn't you say anything? I could have handled the dishes. I wanted to be useful. I wanted to help with packing, not to sit on the sidelines because my hip hurts again." Donnie hugged his stomach. These emotions were just churning inside of him today, practically building a home there. He rubbed his hands together and felt a hand lay on his shoulder. "I get it. But there's no harm in asking for help when you need it. That's what I'm here for." Donnie looked up at Raph and wiped a tear away from his sleeve. Raph gave him a few pats on his shoulder. "You can hang tight. We're about done with the packing already." Raph got up to finish breaking camp. Donnie got into his seat properly and leaned his head back. He got some of the dishes done. At least he helped with something. The four of them were in the car and had just started their journey back. Raph was driving. Mikey got to the front seat 'cause he called dibs, so Leo was stuck in the back with Donnie. Donnie was reading on his phone while gently laying his hand on his bruised hip. Water sprinkled onto the windshield. Rain? But there was no rain predicted for today. The trickle got heavier and heavier. All conversation stopped. The cabin went silent, as all eyes were glued onto the road. The rain was so heavy you could barely see 3 feet in front of you, and it was still daylight. Donnie's stomach clenched as he nervously clung to the back of the front seat. Raph seemed like he was going to power through it. The car suddenly swerved. Donnie's heart dropped into his stomach. Oh, the adrenaline was kicking in now. "What did you do that for?" Leo asked, leaning his head forward. "There was a big tree branch on the road. I didn't want to hit it," Raph said, keeping his attention on the road. Donnie groaned nervously. Leo looked over to see Donnie gripping onto the front seat with his head leaning against it. His cheeks were getting pinker as usual. That wasn't a good sign. "Raph, pull over and turn the hazards." "Don't worry. Raph's got this. Raph, please." Raph gripped the steering wheel. He did as he was told and slowly pulled over. Flipping on the hazards, Leo unbuckled himself to get closer to Donnie. He wrapped his arms around him and let him lean onto his shoulder. Donnie knew it was a mistake to read in the moving vehicle. It always makes his stomach turn. But that sudden jolt only makes it worse. The wind knocked against the car, making it slightly sway. Donnie could hear Mikey start to whimper, but Raph was already on top of it. He adjusted the seat back to make room for Mikey. He unbuckled and hopped into Raph's lap. The rain consisted of a shower head on a full blast of lake-full buckets being dumped. Donnie's heart felt like it could start a motor. Fear was creeping around him again. Donnie closed his eyes. He wished that they would get back home safely, that no one would get hurt, the roads won't be flooded, the pain in his hip would go away, and his stomach would settle down. After a few minutes, the rain began to slow down and the wind calmed slightly. Donnie opened his eyes when he heard the engine starting. He looked around to see that the rain was pretty more gentle now. His stomach felt better too. Leo buckled himself into the middle seat to stay near Donnie. Mikey had crawled back onto his seat and got secured. They got back onto the road and continued their journey. Donnie sighed and released his hands from his death grip. Boy, his palms were sweaty. He couldn't wait to get back home and have some pizza. Donnie's sure that the others wouldn't deny him for any of it. He laid his head a little further onto Leo's shoulder and got more comfortable for the journey home.